You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how we doing tonight?
We are doing great. It is post-NFL draft, and so that means it is Dynasty rookie draft season, and holy crap, I have so many of these things going on right now that I can barely keep my head straight. I've found a lot of things out. Some things I thought I knew, and I was right. Some things I thought I knew, and I was definitely wrong. But it's been fun, and other than that, I'm happy to be doing something with fantasy football besides just talking about it each week and actually being able to draft and build lineups here a little bit to at least start the season.
It does make it a little bit more fun when you finally know where these rookies are landing or have landed, I guess, through the events of the final weekend in April. I actually have started to turn down invitations to leagues because it's hard to keep your head straight on some of these. And honestly, one of the things that drove me nuts when I first started getting really, really into fantasy football and playing in multiple leagues was how much I found myself rooting for guys to be successful when it was for me, but then going up against those guys in a different league and then hoping that they wouldn't have a good week. So but it's definitely one of those, you got to find your balance, got to make sure that what you've done is just enough to keep up with things. But we just participated in a Dynasty startup. I'm a co-owner of a team with Derek. Kevin is also in that league with a bunch of the guys that if you go back and watch or listen to our draft special that we did, a bunch of us got together and said, hey, let's put a league together. So we just did a Dynasty startup in that. And Derek and I, co-owning a team, we employed a pretty fun strategy that I think is a pretty reasonable strategy for people if they're in a Dynasty startup, and if they're in a league like ours, that this one, I guess, where it is a crazy amount of draft picks. I think we had 31 rounds of the draft. And of course, this was all after the NFL draft, so there wasn't a separate rookie draft or anything. But we employed a pretty fun strategy. And that was after about the 19th or 20th pick that we made. And we had a pretty solid lineup, guys that we think were going to contribute and be contributors for a few years. We just started drafting rookies, just taking flyers on rookies, because either they hit and it's gravy and you've got this guy that's really awesome on your team for a long time to come, or at least for the life of his rookie contract, 4 or 5 years, or he doesn't, and you're no worse for the wear. I mean, really, at that point, it's just take it or leave it, and we're hoping that we can take more than we leave.
Absolutely. It's I'm here for a good time, not necessarily a long time type of thing. So definitely worked out there. And I love the fact, because when we were going through and we could then move some guys to taxis, it wasn't one of those that we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to split this up and manage that? I know that that's an issue sometimes when you go through some of these Dynasty startups and all that. You draft too many vets and not enough rookies, and so your taxi squad looks a little lean sometimes. But no, you're really about round 20. We just started throwing darts at some rookies, and it was a lot of fun.
And I mean, honestly, at any point when, you're not drafting guys who were taken in the first, second, maybe third rounds of the rookie draft, I think there's some question marks around some of those dudes, and especially some of the guys that, were maybe good enough to be drafted. It just didn't work out the way that they heard their name get called. But you just start throwing darts, man. And it was actually kind of really fun to just look and be like, yeah, sure. Let's try that guy. Let's try that guy. It just, I'm not sure that anybody else really in that league kind of picked up on what we were doing. Kevin said he didn't really pick up on what we were doing. He's picking 2 slots in front of us and 2 slots behind us. So we had the turnaround pick. So it's a pretty fun strategy, I think. And we'll see if it pays off, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the downside of having so many of these drafts at once, right? Like, I'm hopping in and out of so many of these, trying to catch up with chats, trade offers, where we're at in the draft, like what's kind of coming up and what I'm looking to do with the players available, that I don't pay as much attention here in these first rookie drafts as I do kind of later on when they're more spread out and you can really analyze the board, what people are doing, find a way to maybe, intentionally snipe someone so that way you can then turn around and offer it up for trade fodder and piss someone off in the process, which is always fun. So it's challenging, to say the least, on top of a real work job and everything else.
Right.
Your day gets compacted really quick.
We definitely did draft at least 2 players that we thought were going to be hot commodities among at least some of the other members in that league. And so there was definitely some thought process put into that. And we actually sniped Carson Wentz away from a bunch of guys that didn't pull the trigger on him. Sure, we probably drafted him maybe a round too early, but by the sounds of it, he wouldn't have been there when it was our turn to go again. So
he was not going to be there. There were a bunch of guys.
So
we might have 3 or 4.
We might have reached a little bit. Yeah, we might have reached just a touch, but I think it was the right move at the right time. And now we know that he is a coveted player. So asking price just went up just a little bit more. Should we decide to move off of him? And there was actually one time where Derek and I were talking, and we predicted who you were going to take, Kevin. Actually, Derek just called it out, said there's no way that he doesn't go with, who was it?
I think it was James Conner was that pick there.
Yeah, we were like, there's no way he doesn't take James Conner here. Sure enough, James Conner off the board.
That actually became my funnest game going through there when we were going back and forth, and we'd make a pick, and Alex is going, hey, maybe we go this route, and I'm like, no. That guy's not making it through Kevin twice before it gets back to us. So if we want that guy, we're going to have to take him here. But no, that was a lot of fun being able to kind of know the room a little bit as we started going through that and started being able to kind of text each other back and forth going, hey, this guy I think is going here, and I think this guy is going here. And we started getting pretty good at being able to figure that one out. So it was a lot of fun. And it was definitely a great group of folks in that league. So it'll be a lot of fun for years to come, I have a feeling. But guys, we do have a very awesome show for you tonight. We're going to talk about some Chicago Bears. We're going to talk about some NFL news going on. We have a couple weeks before the NFL draft, we did our kind of rookie mock draft as far as Dynasty setup was going to go. So we're going to go through that and do another 2-round rookie mock on that and kind of compare back and forth. And we may be talking a little bit about some Dynasty trade targets, kind of focusing on running backs and, who could potentially be like a buy low type of candidate and who you need to target and go get for fantasy this year. So let's go ahead and just kind of hop right on over into it with the Chicago Bears there. And the Chicago Bears made the draft a little bit interesting when they decided to move up from 20 to 11 to take Justin Fields as the quarterback. But we're going to go ahead and start where we always do, and that is over in the running back room. And David Montgomery put up an electric season for y'all last year. Finished number 4 overall for the running backs, and he did that with 247 rushing attempts, 1,070 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns with 54 receptions, 64 targets for an additional 438 and 2 through the air. Guys, what are your thoughts on David Montgomery?
David Montgomery showed through last year. Like the Bears attached their wagon to him, even when they were struggling a little bit trying to gain or maintain a lead at times throughout the season. But they really took a step back and realized, look, we're not going to ask Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky to do everything for us. So we need our defense to play very well, and we need our run game to be on point. The defense played okay, but the run game was on point. And David Montgomery had a phenomenal end to the season. Like he was on a real tear there. They kept feeding him the ball. They realized the more you get him, the better he is late in games. got involved a little bit in the passing game due to a Tarik Cohen injury. So that probably contributed to a little bit of the usage. But overall, Montgomery's going to get drafted like a running back 3 or a flex type. But I don't know that he's going to fall that far outside of it, guys. Like he finished in the top 8. I think it's, even if he falls down a little bit and loses some of those receptions, I still think Montgomery can be in the top 14 of running backs and be that upper echelon running back 2 for you. As long as you understand what you're getting. He's not super flashy. He doesn't have the big name yet, but he's a very young guy. He has a lot of tread left on his tires, and the Bears are now going to be developing a rookie quarterback. So who's your best friend? Tight ends and running backs. So that way the quarterback doesn't have to do everything. I like David Montgomery.
I like him because of what he showed last year in the passing game, and especially if they're going to have this transition. I still think that the Bears will employ Andy Dalton at least for the first part of the season. They're paying him $10 million. You might as well get something out of him and let Justin Fields kind of come along. I think there will be a point at some point during the season where that changes, but I don't think that David Montgomery sees a seismic shift in his usage once that change happens, especially on the ground, but probably more so in the running game, or excuse me, in the passing game. I mean, he's been pretty dang consistent over his 2 seasons. He's had 242 rushes his rookie year, 247 rushes last year, 889 rushing yards last year, got over the 1,000-yard mark this past year.
That's
no, you're like, are you way behind?
I am way behind, apparently. My bad.
Your camera's freaking out too.
Yeah.
And he had 8 rushing touchdowns last year to the 6 that he had his rookie season. So he has been, as far as you can see, for 2 years, the model of consistency. And he showed that he can be a weapon in the pass game last year. He has added that element and proven that he has that element of his game. So I think it would be, I think if you're able to get David Montgomery as a running back 3 or a flex option, you might be laughing all the way to the bank with your fantasy football championship, with your trophy and your cash in hand, because he's good enough to be a running back 1, whether or not they still allow him to be used as such, and get him the touches that he needs to make that happen is to be seen. But I think that David Montgomery is a gem of a running back in fantasy football.
Yeah, there's a few things there that when you look at it from his rookie season to last season, he's a volume-based runner, right? He gets a ton of touches, makes some hay out of it. Yeah, he was a little over 4 yards a rush attempt last year. So, was efficient when he got the carries to it. But some of the things that concern me is the fact that we saw Tarik Cohen go out very early on in the season. And when Tarik Cohen is out there, he is going to take up a lot of that passing work. I know that Montgomery showed some chops with that this past year, but I don't know that continues this year. But you're right. He is a guy that right now you can get for a value in fantasy drafts, because a lot of people are looking past him, to the point where there's very few times in fantasy history that you can look at a guy that finished as running back 4 on the season, that came into the season as the proclaimed starter, finished it as the starter, is the proclaimed starter for the next year, and is being drafted not in necessarily the first round type of thing. So, and that's without them necessarily adding another piece in the offseason, whether that's through the draft or signing a big time free agent, bringing him in. But some of the things that helped him out last year was really from week 12 on. And when you looked at week 12 on, he played the 6th worst defense against the run, the worst defense, the 2nd worst, the 5th worst, the 3rd worst, the 6th worst from weeks 12 to 17. And that greatly contributed to that finish, where he went, 7-1, 7-1, 9-6 to finish his 4. So really kind of closing that thing out. he definitely won some people some fantasy championships last year, really putting together that run during the last couple of weeks to get into the playoffs and then the entire playoffs. Like, he definitely will make some room with that opportunity given, but I don't know. I don't know what that passing work's going to look like this coming year. So I'm with you. I'm probably put him in there as like that third running back flex type of deal, but not a guy that I'm necessarily swinging for the fences early with.
I think what needs to be remembered is that Matt Nagy is in charge of that offense. And even if he relinquishes play calling duties or whatever, Matt Nagy's in charge of that offense. And he finally seems like he may have a quarterback that he won't be at ends with, be it Mitch Trubisky, be it Nick Foles, be it whatever they decide to do. So I think that needs to be remembered, that this offense is going to be dynamic. And shoot, they were what, 5-0, and then they switched quarterbacks. And the season didn't really play out the way that they wanted, but they still made the playoffs, didn't they? Were they close? I know they were right there at the end. They were in tight games, trying to make the playoffs, I guess, out of that.
No, they made it. They made
NFC
it. The Bears.
Okay, thank you.
The Bears made the playoffs.
That's what I thought. So this offense, while it may look dysfunctional from the outside, there's some really good pieces to it, and David Montgomery is front and center until Justin Fields establishes himself. David Montgomery is front and center as one of those great pieces. I know there's another one in the wide receiver room that we'll talk about, but that will again be contingent upon who's throwing him the football. With David Montgomery, you don't really need to worry too much about who's throwing the football because it's a lot easier to turn around and hand it off than it is to throw it out 15 yards. And subsequently miss by 15 yards. That's one.
Yep, that's one. We got it in there this time. So, all righty. So let's go ahead and move on to Tarik Cohen, who had an injury-shortened season last year. Finished his running back 114, but really went down with that knee injury in week 3 and missed the rest of the season. But what are your thoughts about Tarik Cohen going in and his role in this offense?
I like Tarik Cohen as a depth piece later in drafts. He's a guy that's kind of being forgotten a little bit because of that injury. But I do think that he will have some decent flex appeal depending on your roster construction. He's not built to take the lead back role. That's why they brought Williams in behind him. That's a insurance policy against Montgomery if he gets dinged up more so than Tarik Cohen. But he's that quick, he's that quick fly route guy coming out of the backfield, right? That's what they use him for. They run him on stretch plays. They don't run him between the tackles, which is good at 5'6" and 190. He kind of gets swallowed up by offensive linemen, but if you can get him outside the tackles and let him get upfield, he does provide a little bit of pop for you at times. And then with his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, he's going to get usage in this offense. Like, he's not just a number 2 running back who sits quietly on the sidelines. That workload is probably going to be split up realistically. When you're talking total touches, probably somewhere in the name, it's like 65, 25, 10. Like that's kind of how it's going to be between these 3 backs. But Cohen's a nice piece to have, bye weeks, injuries, just to see what the Bears do with it, with this new offense and a quarterback. So he's not a guy that I'm searching after in a certain round, but he is a guy that I have been finding lately that, I pop through and I'm looking for a little bit of running back depth, and, you don't know about this guy. You don't know about this guy. All the rookie running backs outside of the top 3 are kind of question marks this season as well. So, Tarik Cohen's a guy that I can go, you know what? At least I know he's going to catch the ball. And in PPR leagues, if you're filling him in as a flex spot or a bye week guy or something like that, you at least know you're getting volume because of those catches. And so his floor is a little bit safer than some of these other backup style running backs.
While doing research on Tarik Cohen, I just saw the really devastating news about his twin brother who was missing and then was found dead, and so that's awful. We talk about these guys as kind of pieces and parts to football teams and to fantasy football teams, and their numbers and everything, and I can't imagine what he's going through right now. Losing your twin brother, that's awful. So I hate to say thoughts and prayers because that's awful and it's meaningless, but you got to really feel for what he's going to be playing through this year. But I was looking at what the update was on his injury, and I haven't found the answer to that just yet. So Derek, if you would like to go, I will find that answer and then I will chime in again.
All right, that's 2. So with
my goodness,
with Cohen tore his ACL back in September. So he is on track, barring any sort of setback, Alex, to be able to show up and participate during the preseason workouts if the players decide to participate in these. So I'm not too worried about his ability to come in and play again, because they're not running between the tackles, right? Like he's a little bit safer because he's not getting swallowed up, wrapped up, and twisted there, in the middle of the field. He's getting off to the side. He's able to get out of bounds, or some shoestring tackles, or a little bit less wear and tear on the body than what a traditional thumper, if you will, would have to experience.
Thank you for that. I'll continue if I can, Derek. Being since you didn't want to speak with your microphone, I will continue on.
I'm just leaving it live. I'm hot micing the rest of the
time. Here's what you can probably pretty much guarantee out of Tarik Cohen, based on just the past, last year notwithstanding, because of that injury. You can probably bank on about 150 to 160 touches, right? He's had 140, 170, 143 touches throughout the season. And you can probably bank somewhere in the 75 of those touches, 75, 85 of those touches will be runs. So if you're looking for the volume on the ground, if you play in a PPR league, then Tarik Cohen is right up your alley. If you're not in a PPR league, then that value, I think, goes down just slightly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's probably a guy that's a 10th round plus flyer type of thing. Like, I don't necessarily see him, he's a deep late shot type of deal that has some PPR upside, but he's more of a depth piece, fill in, in an injury type of thing, fill in, bye week type of thing, because he may give you some of that PPR value, but he's not a guy that's going to have much of a ceiling or much of a floor out there. But I think that's where you'll see him really, take some of that workload is going to be with the passing game. And that's about it. A spell back type of thing.
Would you rather have Nyheim Hines or Tarik Cohen? Because they're kind of the same back.
They are the same
teams.
Yeah, they're the same for me in either one of those.
Yeah, that seems like 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I think I'd actually probably rather have Tarik Cohen in that instance, simply because of the fact that Indianapolis, backfield, I think they're going to try and work Marlon Mack in a little bit again this year. So that if that situation holds true, I think that it's a little bit more crowded, and I'll take the guy that's, in a little less crowded situation there.
And that could be because I feel like the top 3 backs. Okay. David Montgomery is not Jonathan Taylor. So that's not the comparison there, but it's where you go after that. It's Nyheim Hines and Tarik Cohen are very much the same guy, as are Damien Williams and Marlon Mack.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the backups to the starters, right? Your depth chart, those are a lot of the same guys. And so that's why I'm just seeing if we'd place them the same. Because I do think that where I'm looking at one, I'm eyeballing the other, right? Like if that's something, depending on your scoring system or just a depth piece, that's something I'm eyeballing. They're not an outright handcuff. Like it's not that type of situation. It's, you know what, we're getting into rounds, 16, 17, something like that. And holy crap, this guy's left on the board because everybody wanted to jump on the rookies. Well, hell, I'll take a flyer on him in the 16th round. If he doesn't pan out in 3 weeks, then you cut him and you go grab someone else who's starting to emerge where people overlooked him. Like it's a very low risk play to wait and draft someone like a Tarik Cohen or a Nyheim Hines. And then if it doesn't work, guys, move off and move on. There will be other opportunities when you're looking at, the bottom 3, 4, 5 guys on your bench.
Yeah, I think maybe the only big differentiator is years of service, right? Nyheim Hines has only been in the league for this will be his 4th year, and Tarik Cohen is going into his 5th year, I believe. So, it's just the 1 year of service that you was the real differentiator. I mean, it really depends on, do you want to go younger or do you want to go with more experience, I guess is the word.
And actually, maybe that is the case. You go with a little bit more youth there, and you go with the guy not coming off of a season-ending injury the year before. So there's something to that. But I think you're right. That right there is probably a perfect comparison out there as far as who they're going to be drafted around and who would you rather have. Like they really are fulfilling the same role, just on 2 different teams there. So. But that you bring up another guy in that running back room over there in Chicago, Damien Williams. And the last time we saw him, he was winning a Super Bowl with the Chiefs and put up a really good game in that one. But opting out of the 2020 season, guys, what are your thoughts on Damien Williams?
He should have been the Super Bowl MVP.
That is a hill that I think we will all die on, right?
I will absolutely die on that hill. As
MVP.
A Broncos fan, I will tell you,
should have been.
Damien Williams was the MVP of that Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes did what he needed to at the right time, but Williams is the one who controlled that game. And Williams
was the game
is
changer.
The one.
He was the game changer.
So, I'm glad that he's coming back. I'm glad that his personal life has kind of subsided a little bit. He did sit out the 2020 season. His grandmother was in very poor health, and he's very close with her and didn't want to take the chance of contracting COVID and then giving it to her, and with her immune deficiency because of her health problems, he didn't want that on his conscience. You know what? I get that. More power to him. This is more than just a game, right? These guys have lives and families and all that sort of stuff. So, I think it's a bummer for him in a way because I do think that kind of professionally set him back. I think he had a role carved out with the Chiefs. Had he been able to return and the pandemic was not going on, that wasn't the case. He opted out, I think, even before the draft, if I'm not mistaken. Was it after the draft?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but yeah, so they drafted CEH. Williams said, I'm not going to. And then the rest is history. But I think he will serve a small role, right? Like he's not going to take big chunks of plays away from Montgomery, but he's going to have a couple packages. There's no doubt about it. You don't bring in a Super Bowl winning running back with some experience and success under his belt and not do anything with him. Now, I don't think he emerges as the RB1 on the Chicago Bears. And quite frankly, he's a guy in most leagues that's going undrafted. So I think he's a guy that you can flag. You can keep an eye on him. If you really love your team and there's nothing else out there that you like for the last pick of your draft and you happen to be sitting on David Montgomery, I go ahead and pick him up, I guess. I mean, no one's going to tell you you're a fool for picking Damien Williams with the last pick in your draft. But outside of that, I'm going to sit back and see where that falls. Like, I'm not going to go after him. I'm not going to reach. I'll flag him. I'll keep an eye on it, see what happens. If Montgomery stumbles, if he gets dinged up, Damien Williams is the guy taking over that first and second down role, clearly. So he instantly walks into RB2 type volume if Montgomery goes down.
That's the role that I see Damien Williams. You know, he's the veteran. He's kind of going to be the old hat in the room at the ripe old age of 29, I think. But he's going to be kind of that veteran presence, that leadership among that group. But really, if you were going to handcuff David Montgomery, Damien Williams is the handcuff, in air quotes for people listening. That he's the handcuff. If you were going to go with the handcuff, it's Damien Williams. It's not Tarik Cohen. Tarik Cohen's not going to go into that first and second down workload. He might go into some of those second down workloads, but you know, it's going to be Damien Williams that's going to get the turnaround and hand the ball and try and get 4 yards in a cloud of dust. That's what he's going to be. So if that's what you're doing, and you have, like you said, Kevin, a David Montgomery already on your roster, and you want to protect that investment because you believe in what the Bears are doing on offense, then you go after Damien Williams late, or you pick him up, you know, in free agency and try to get him for no money off your fab budget if that's the way you got to go.
Yeah, I think you guys have both hit the nail right on the head there. And unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about in this running back room, we'll go ahead and move on to the wide receivers. All righty, guys. So the wide receiver room, this is where it starts getting a little interesting here with the Bears too. Allen Robinson, who ended up signing his franchise tag when there was a little bit conversation early on in the offseason. Didn't necessarily look like that might be the case, but he'll be back and probably has the best quarterback support that he'll play with in his entire career here. But finished as wide receiver 12 last year, 102 receptions, 151 targets, 1,250 yards for 6 touchdowns. Guys, your thoughts on Allen Robinson?
I love A-Rob. I've loved A-Rob for a couple different years. He's a PPR guy who is kind of the only show in town, so you know the volume and consistency is going to be there. At times, it was the quarterback play that led to a couple down weeks. It wasn't necessarily what Allen Robinson was doing. It was the fact that, for whatever reason, Mitch Trubisky would forget Allen Robinson was on the field and only throw it his direction 5 or 6 times as opposed to peppering him with 8 to 10 targets and making sure that he's a focal point in the end zone. But he's a guy who has consistently put up really good numbers with subpar quarterbacks. He did it in Jacksonville before he left. He's done it in Chicago. He runs very crisp routes. He's very good on the sideline, contorting his body, coming down with the ball. He will get behind the defense every once in a while. That's not necessarily his forte, but he is a very, very good wide receiver and a guy that most people pick up as their wide receiver too. Like, he gets overlooked, he gets picked up as a wide receiver too, and then ends up in top 12 wide receiver 1 territory. So there's value with Allen Robinson. So the same type of things happening this year. He's not being drafted in the top 12 of receivers. He's being drafted just outside of that. But I think that there's a very clear path of targets and volume headed his way, no matter whether it's Andy Dalton or Justin Fields when he comes in the game. So I feel comfortable with Allen Robinson, and I think that he's going to finish RB 11 or maybe RB 10 this upcoming season. Or excuse me, wide receiver. And a lot of that's just, you go from 6 touchdowns to 8 touchdowns. No, not RB. But he goes from 6 touchdowns and kind of gets up to 8, where this elite class or the upper echelon class of wide receiver is. He's he finishes right there inside the top 10, and you get your value on him.
Yeah, I think if they're so I've never really had the chance to have Allen Robinson on my team because I play in a lot of leagues with Kevin, and slow on the draw apparently. because he is gone before I have a chance to really get him. So I don't know what it's like to have Allen Robinson as a fantasy football player, but I know that Kevin,
glorious.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys understand. And he is an enigma because he did it with subpar quarterback play. He's been putting up these numbers, and at the receiver spot, I say this often, you're only as good as the guy throwing you the football. That's not the case with Allen Robinson, because he is just as good, whether it's Blake Bortles or Mitch Trubisky, guys that aren't starting quarterbacks in the league anymore. And he's been able to be consistent and put up numbers. If he falls into the end zone a few more times, yeah, I mean, he's right there at the end of that wide receiver one territory, and you're probably going to be able to draft him after that first round of wide receivers kind of goes.
No, you hit the nail right there on the head. And he's a guy that you're able to get in about the fourth round in most cases. And for me, and the way I tend to construct teams, especially redraft, that's the point in time I start looking to pick up my first wide receiver. And Allen Robinson fits the bill of what I really like to put on a team. He's a guy that gets a ton of targets, gets a ton of receptions out there. To Kevin's point, he's not going to be a guy that necessarily gets behind the defense and makes a big play and breaks one, but he's a big body receiver that's going to see a ton of volume. And that's the type of wide receiver that I love having as that consistent anchor point on my team and really be able to bring some things home there. And so kind of brings this to another question that I've got for you. Right now, when you're looking fourth round type of wide receivers, you've got some guys like Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin is up there. So if you guys had to pick one of those fourth round wide receivers, who are you putting on your team and why?
The options are between Allen Robinson and Terry McLaurin. Is that what we're narrowing it down to?
If you've got another fourth round receiver that you would rather have in there, I will accept that answer as well.
Oh, well, I would go Allen Robinson, I think, because you know what you're getting. You know that he's going to be okay no matter who's throwing the football there in Chicago. And we know that Andy Dalton can feed a elite wide receiver, right? We saw that in his years in Cincinnati. He may not be the same guy that he was when he was in Cincinnati, but we know that he can find an elite receiver and utilize an elite receiver, like we saw with AJ Green. And I think that brings a certain level of comfortability, given the fact that we know that while McLaurin this year will probably get the ball thrown his way several times, it will also get thrown to the other team several times because that's what Ryan Fitzpatrick does. So just based on consistency, I kind of like the direction. If it was, if this is a dynasty, I'm a little more comfortable with Allen Robinson because I know what's coming up after this year / halfway through this year versus a Terry McLaurin, where I'm not sure exactly what the future holds at the quarterback spot there in Washington.
I think my roster construction for this specific pick that we're talking about would very much vary on how my first 3 rounds went. If I'm able to, if I'm in a position where you get that, bell cow running back in the first round, and then you're able to follow through in the second round, and maybe you have Davante Adams fall to you. Davante Adams is a guy who's plummeting in drafts right now with all this news swirling around with Aaron Rodgers. So if I'm able to start, and this is actually possible, right? If you start with Jonathan Taylor and then follow that up with Davante Adams, okay, there you go. So then third round, whatever, pick running back.
Another running back, yeah.
Yeah, pick a running
somebody
back.
That's an RB2 territory. Hell, even if you get, this might be a reach, but even if you get a David Montgomery at that point.
Right. So you're looking at something like that. Then, how about this? Gibson, right? You get Gibson falls somehow or something. Anyway, Joe Mixon. You start with Jonathan Taylor, Davante Adams, Joe Mixon. So there's your starting 3. I'm okay with taking a Terry McLaurin in that situation because I have my floor set. I have a guy who is going to be peppered with targets, who has great hands, who run crisp routes, who is clearly the focal point of the passing game in Davante Adams. And that's not going to change whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, Chad Kelly, or whoever else they stick in under center. Like, Davante Adams is going to be the first, second, and half the third option. And then you're going to float in Alan Lazard, Bobby Tonyan, and Aaron Jones.
Right.
All this to say, at that point, then I'd go with Terry McLaurin for that upside. Terry McLaurin is a guy who saw a very healthy increase in targets last year, much to my surprise. I didn't think he was going to see it, and he did. Through all the quarterback turmoil in Washington, McLaurin's targets were increased. He's young. He is that speedster who does get behind the defense. And because Fitzpatrick is the quarterback, you know he'll be more than happy to take those deep shots where Alex Smith didn't. So you could see a little bit more bang with Terry McLaurin this coming season. So that would be kind of the one situation where I'd lean that. But other than that, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, all kind of fall right in that same window. In most cases, I'm taking Allen Robinson, but there are circumstances based off my roster construction that I will go Terry McLaurin and be happy that he's my second wide receiver. There's nothing wrong with that.
Very good. I love it, love it, love it. So that's kind of where I'm at as well. And you look at right now, kind of what you're getting in the fourth round for wide receivers and who could potentially be there more often than not. You're talking McLaurin, you're talking Godwin, you're talking Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, Kenny Galladay, and DJ Moore, as far as kind of the group of receivers that you're going to get around there. And out of those guys, Allen Robinson is definitely going to provide kind of the best floor out there. Not necessarily going to have the ceiling that some of these other guys will have, but from a consistency standpoint, he's a guy that I would absolutely love to be able to put on my roster, and especially the fourth round. You know how I construct them. It's typically a very high floor team, and Allen Robinson fits that bill very, very well for me. So, all righty, let's go ahead and move on to some of the other wide receivers that they've got over there in Chicago. You're talking Darnell Mooney, who finished wide receiver 51 last year, 61 receptions, 98 targets, and 631 and 4 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Darnell Mooney?
There is a love affair going around the fantasy industry at the moment for Mooney. I don't know that I'm subscribing to that much of it. Now, he has taken over that second wide receiver role that Anthony Miller just could never quite wrap his hands around. So there's definitely a piece there. Justin Fields makes it a little bit more intriguing than Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles did. But I'm just not sold, guys. Like, Mooney is not a guy that I'm going, yeah, that's the piece right there. That's the piece right there. Like, we're getting down that lane. I'm looking, maybe I'll pick my first tight end instead of a Darnell Mooney. Like, I don't need a fifth wide receiver of that caliber. Like, if I'm wanting a fifth wide receiver, I want upside. I want youth. I want, some bang. Mooney's not providing that for me. And so I'm going to politely pass. It's just not in my wheelhouse per se.
It's funny, though, because you say you want upside and you want youth. Well, the guy was a rookie last year, so
he's
hard to get better than that.
Denzel
he's got youth.
Mims. But I want Mims.
Sure.
I want Pittman. I want Paris Campbell. I'd rather take a flyer on Paris Campbell.
But here's the point that I'll make to that. Is that he is young, and it's really hard to judge somebody not named Allen Robinson on the Chicago Bears wide receiving core because of who was throwing the football to them last year. That's very, very difficult to judge what he is going to be based on who was throwing the football last year. I mean, you have Mitch Trubisky, who could sometimes hit the broadside of a barn. And you had Nick Foles, who wasn't exactly going to blow you away with the throws that he was making. So it's really difficult to see what this kid's going to be. He is smaller. He does kind of remind me of those wide receiver types that Justin Fields liked to play with there at Ohio State. So maybe there's something there. But we can only judge somebody based on what we've seen from them. What we've seen wasn't all that great, but I still think that there might be some upside. I can see why this buzz is coming about on this kid because he only played 1 year. He had a relatively okay year for a rookie, and now he's going to have an upgrade at the quarterback position. So I can understand where this buzz is coming from. That being said, I'm staying away.
Thank you. And I guess my main point is there are third receiver options on teams that are more enticing to me than what Darnell Mooney is as the second wide receiver in Chicago.
Michael Gallup.
Well, Michael,
for a third on a, just to give you a comparison, as a third wide receiver option on a team type of thing.
Michael Gallup, Chase Claypool for the Steelers, Paris Campbell for the Colts, that type of option. I don't know. I think I'd rather have Terrence Marshall, the rookie, going into Carolina over Darnell Mooney. Now, I'm not saying that Sam Bradford is a better quarterback than Justin Fields. Currently,
Sam
he
Darnold.
is. Yeah, Darnold. But
Could you imagine Bradford on that offense though?
Oh God.
Oh God.
He'd just be sucking off of him like a leech. Hey, I made another, $150 million for just sitting on my butt.
So, Kevin's love affair with Sam Bradford continues.
Oh, Sam Bradford's biggest waste of space. If he didn't go to Oklahoma, no one would ever know who he was. He would have never been drafted 1 overall, and then he wouldn't have sucked NFL teams out of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Didn't he win the Heisman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, if he
was a
didn't
good
go to
college
Oklahoma,
quarterback, but we've seen good college quarterbacks not make it in the NFL.
That's very true.
The dude that just signed to be a tight end at age 34
in Jacksonville. But no, I'm right there with you too. I don't know that Darnell Mooney, does anything to kind of blow my hair back, what little of it there is, but he's a guy that may has some intrigue out there, I guess is probably the best way to say it. He's got some intrigue because of the use and because of what the possibilities can be with some better quarterback play there, right? Second receiving option. We'll see what that kind of looks like, but that was one of those when you and I were talking earlier today, Kevin, and we were, talking about a guy named Darnell Mooney. We were kind of going back and forth about, where some potential trade value could be on that. And from a lot of things out there, there's a lot of people very, very intrigued about what the possibilities are on that thing, to the point where folks are tending to overpay a little bit for Darnell Mooney. And that's a guy that I'm not necessarily looking to do. That's a guy that I'm going to, if I've got him on my roster, I'm going to see if I can, put him out there and make a deal happen, but I'm not actively seeking him out. And it's not a guy that I'm going to be actively seeking out in the drafts going forward to see if I can put him on my roster, regardless of whether it's Dynasty or whether it's a redraft type of situation, because there are a lot of other second wide receivers on teams that I would rather have, to the point where there's a lot of third wide receivers on teams that I would rather have as well, just because they're going to see more opportunity and they're in a more consistent offense for passing volume. So Anthony Miller, we mentioned him, 76 targets last year, 49 receptions, 485 yards, 2 touchdowns, finished as wide receiver 74. Your thoughts on Anthony Miller?
Justin, we're going to find out if Justin Fields can resurrect anything that the Bears thought Anthony Miller might be. Other than that, he's kind of irrelevant until either Fields can show that he can keep 3 receivers fed, or he sees a change of scenery and kind of gets a new life from a different team. But as long as he's with the Bears at the moment, he's a guy I'm not drafting. He's a guy I'm not looking at. He's just a player at this point.
Yeah, as far as receiving options go, in this Chicago team, to me it is Allen Robinson, and then there's
Allen
Tarik
Robinson.
Cohen. Is that what I said? What did I
Just
say?
straight. No, you were right. I'm saying just straight Allen Robinson.
Well, no, but yes, pretty much. Essentially, yes, that is the point that I'll make. But beyond that, it is Tarik Cohen, Darnell, Mooney, and then everybody else. And beyond that, like, if I'm not getting one of those three as a receiving option, I'm out. And I'm still out on Darnell Mooney too. So really.
So if you're not getting Allen Robinson, you're out on Bears wide receivers or receiving options. Okay.
For now. Yeah. Until I get proven otherwise, which might be too late, but yeah.
All right. That's kind of where I'm at as well, as a guy that, I don't even know that if I'm the last pick on a draft that I'm going to necessarily take a flyer on him. Not necessarily a guy that I'm going to be, gung-ho to put on any of my rosters. But the Bears do have some other receiving options out there. Any desire to talk about Damiere Byrd, Javon Wims, or Marquise Goodwin?
Can you tell me where any of those guys played college football?
Didn't Goodwin play in San Francisco for a hot minute?
Yeah, he did. I'd have to look it up.
Georgia. I'm assuming one of them. Wims. Did Wims go to Georgia?
No, Riley Ridley did.
Some backstory there.
Joke. Yeah.
Yep.
But that's truth. Riley Ridley went to Georgia.
Sure.
Dude came out a year too early. All right, side note, Bears receiving room. Riley Ridley is the younger brother to Calvin Ridley. And when they played each other in the national championship game, Riley actually had a very good game against Alabama that year, but he felt his oats a little bit too much and came out a year early, and subsequently has been buried on an NFL roster in Chicago because he needed one more year of preparation, if you will, and he's just not going to pan out. Unfortunate. Anyway, tight ends, Derek. Let's talk tight ends.
All right. I'd managed to look one of them up. Damiere Byrd went to South Carolina, so I got one for you. But now let's go ahead and head right on over to the tight end room. And Cole Kmet coming into his second year over there in Chicago. The rookie last year had 28 receptions, 44 targets for 243 and 2 through the air. Finished his tight end 43 last year. Your thoughts on Cole Kmet?
He is a guy that I am sitting back and picking off late in Dynasty startups just because he's a young guy, has a new quarterback who's going to lean on him. Jimmy Graham ain't going to play forever, all the things. And Kmet came out pretty highly regarded out of Notre Dame. So he's a guy that in redraft leagues I don't see him being necessarily drafted as a tight end one anywhere, which is the right call. At least a lot of the guys we play with like to have at least 2 tight ends on the roster. So he will get picked up in that second wave and just kind of sat on, most likely by one Craig Hammett, because he has some weird infatuation with Chicago Bears tight ends, it seems like. But that's okay.
Shout out to Craig.
Hey, shout out to Craig. But no, other than that, young player, has some upside. Tight ends take a little bit longer to develop in the NFL because they're both blocking and receiving. So Kmet poses some intrigue. But at this point, he's still a tight end too. So he's right there in the middle with a bunch of other guys and doesn't necessarily stand out to me just yet. I'd rather go with a Blake Jarwin, just being in a more pass happy offense. Honestly, I think I'd take a stab at Hayden Hurst, even though he is the forgotten soldier right now because Kyle Pitts went to Atlanta. That offense still has to throw the ball a ton. And at the end of the day, I trust Matt Ryan throwing the ball a little bit more than I trust anybody in Chicago currently until Justin Fields has a chance to develop.
Yeah, I have a different strategy when it comes to drafting tight ends. So Cole Kmet is never on my radar.
Fair enough.
That I probably go tight end earlier than most people.
Yeah, you're an early tight end kind of guy, and that's all right. Won you a championship last year, so good for you. See, I'm even plugging your championship for you.
Thanks. And who did I beat in the first round of those playoffs?
Yeah, you got lucky. Just saying.
Sorry. The mark in the W column went no matter what. There was not an asterisk next to it that said got lucky.
Yeah, fair enough.
Same mark.
All right. So for me, Cole Kmet has some intrigue out there, and the whole reason that he has some intrigue is what do the Bears do with Jimmy Graham this year, who's still on the roster? Jimmy Graham, who ended up finishing inside of tight end 1 territory as tight end 11, really got there through a lot of touchdowns work where he had 8 touchdowns. So, is this the year that you see, kind of those roles reversed where you see Cole Kmet being the red zone target, being the guy that's going to see more snaps playing through there? That's really kind of where the intrigue comes from, because if he is, Cole Kmet is a guy for, dynasty purposes that actually has a lot of intrigue there, where if he takes that sole role of the tight end, you're looking at a tight end 1 with a very young type of tight end there. But for redraft leagues, he's a guy that I'm willing to wait on and willing to be wrong about this year, because again, tight ends typically take about 3 years before they really kind of blossom into what you're going to see them become in the NFL. And Kevin already hit onto the points as to why with that. So that's where he sits for me. He's a guy with a lot of intrigue, but not necessarily a go get for me in any league format, but a guy that if he falls to me in the right kind of round, I am very willing to pull the trigger there and scoop him up. So guys, any desire to talk about Jimmy Graham?
No. Great NFL career.
Good job. And if he happens to even come close to that touchdown total that he had last year, I mean, he had 2 and then 3, and then last year was 8. If he comes close to that, that's his value. But boy, is that a risk to take when there are more viable, more consistent, targeted tight ends down in the red zone than Jimmy Graham.
He kind of proves the point that if you're a tight end that catches a touchdown every other game on average, you're going to kind of finish inside of that top 12, and really kind of showcases the difference between that tier 1 and everybody else kind of thing in that positional grouping. So that brings us over to the quarterback room, and they've got a few guys on the roster there. They've got Andy Dalton, who they just brought in this offseason and signed. They've still got Nick Foles that they've got under contract, and they traded up to take Justin Fields in the first round. So guys, let's just figure out who we want to talk about first here. Where do you want to start?
Andy Dalton.
Yeah, we should start with the guy who's gonna start week 1, as evidenced by Chicago's Twitter. The Bears official Twitter account, after they signed him, putting a picture of him and the text QB1. Little did they know that a few weeks later, true QB1 would walk through the door.
Fair enough. I think you're right. I think he's a guy that you'll probably see him move out of the starting quarterback right after the bye week and then start transitioning into Fields, especially if he's ready. But Andy Dalton was QB 31 last year and had some fill-in roles for an injured Dak Prescott, where he completed 216 on 333, 2,169 yards through the air with 14 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Your thoughts on Andy Dalton?
I think Andy Dalton is going to be a serviceable stopgap until the Chicago Bears feel like Justin Fields is ready. Dalton has proven that he can pepper a number 1 wide receiver so it doesn't affect Allen Robinson whatsoever. He was able to do it with A.J. Green for years. He was able to do it with Amari Cooper and to some extent CeeDee Lamb in Dallas last year. He'll be able to do it in Chicago. He's not going to go out and win you games. He doesn't have the laser rocket arm. He does get flustered at times. But if you tell Andy Dalton to go out and make sure this guy gets the ball, they will call enough plays to make sure Andy Dalton can get said guy the ball.
Derek, you brought up an interesting point that you think that Andy Dalton will be the guy through the bye week. And as we're recording this right now, obviously, if you're watching it live, it is Tuesday night. If you're listening to it, when we post it on Thursday, excuse me. I know when our podcasts come out.
Thursday and Friday.
The NFL schedule will be released in between that time. And so we don't know what Chicago's bye week is. If Chicago's bye week happens to fall earlier, weeks 4 through 12 are the scheduled weeks for bye weeks in 21. And so if that bye week is week 4, I don't think that we see Justin Fields in week 6 or week 5, excuse me. I'm not sure that happens unless it is just a colossal failure. That's what are we at? 3?
That's 3.
Damn it, that's 3. If they go 0-3.
Right. Yeah. Unless it is a colossal failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless it is just an absolute doesn't look good, is not promising at all, then you throw the kid to the wolves and try to save a season because, you get 3 games down in that division. It's going to be difficult. But if they're looking
Not
okay.
If Rodgers isn't there.
That's
true.
Fair. That's fair. That division becomes a little bit more wide open. But if they look okay, and we should also note that last year they were 5-0 and switched quarterbacks, that it would be reasonable to assume that Fields wouldn't take over if that bye week is early. I don't see him making a start until double-digit weeks, probably no sooner than week 8. That's 2 months into season, plus an extra month of training camp and another couple of weeks of OTAs. That might be enough to get the kid up to speed. Their season might be well in doubt. Again, extra playoff spot this year, so there's a lot to play for later on for a lot of these teams that are right on fringe of making the playoffs. So I'm not so sure that this is such a cut and dry, depending on where their bye week falls. Is the point I'm making that we see Justin Fields so quickly. So I still think you're going to get some traction out of Andy Dalton. It won't be the full season. I'm firmly in that camp. I don't think that he plays the full season or starts the full season. But, I still think that with some of the pieces that he has around him, it's not a bad option in a super flex league. It's not a great option in a super flex league, but he's certainly not going to be my QB1. But he might be serviceable for a few weeks as you wait for other options. Especially if you happen to miss out on Justin Fields in a rookie draft or in if for whatever reason the draft just falls and you're kind of stuck. Andy Dalton might be a viable option for at least the first part of the season.
So I think he's going to play sooner than not. And I think that because the Bears fan base has been very vocal about
tortured
dislike of the Mitch Trubisky deal, right, where the Bears traded up to get him. They were very vocal about bringing Andy Dalton in, saying, what the hell are you guys thinking? This isn't the answer. And by drafting Justin Fields, it bought Matt Nagy and the general manager.
Ryan Pace. That's
Pace,
sad that I know the Chicago Bears general manager. That's how bad they have been at drafting.
But it bought them a lifeline. So they have to use that lifeline pretty early to salvage their jobs. Otherwise, there's a good chance the front office comes in and says, you know what, clean house. We know we like this guy. We're going to bring a new coach in who can handle Justin Fields, who can develop Justin Fields, what have you. And we're just going to let it be his quarterback. You've had your chance and you crap the bed. So I think we're going to see Fields sooner rather than later because between Pace and Nagy, they can't afford to have him sit on the bench.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that especially because with Andy Dalton's contract, it's not a they're going to be paying a guy even more to sit on the bench and Nick Foles this year than what they're going to be paying Andy Dalton. So his contract's not one in which, if you're a believer in following the money on how teams are going to react and go, it's not one of those that his contract is to a point where they're kind of stuck with him this season. His contract is one where they brought him in. You're really kind of being that bridge gap type of guy. And then you go out and you trade up for a guy in the first round. I think the fans are going to, make them play their hand a little bit earlier than they may have necessarily wanted to. Cause I think you're right, Alex. I think they probably go into that thinking of that's going to be the case. But even if that bye week is bye week 5 or 6, I think coming out of that, you're going to see Justin Fields go through that, because I think you're going to be able to see him compete for the job going into camp on that one. Now, Andy Dalton having the season and the tenure underneath his belt and being able to learn a couple of different systems and all of that, how it plays through, I think he'll get the start because he is that pro and knows how to prepare for games and is more NFL ready at this point, having been in the league and been a starting quarterback for several years. I think that will win him the job day one, but I think they move on from him very quickly, especially if the season goes poorly. So let's go ahead and talk about the new guy in town there, Justin Fields. What are your thoughts with the Bears moving up to get Justin Fields?
Just say it.
The Bears
should have been a Denver Bronco.
The Bears have drafted so many players that I wanted the Broncos to draft. That I almost wonder if I'm by
you got the wrong orange and blue on.
Yeah, like if I'm by default a pseudo Bears fan, because I like so many pieces of this team. Like I really do. Justin Fields is a guy I really wanted in Denver, so I was really salty at the Broncos when they didn't take him. The only thing that saves that for me is if they land Aaron Rodgers. If they don't land Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to be salty all over again. So I like Fields. I think Fields was clearly the second best quarterback in this draft. I think that his epilepsy that he has reportedly completely under control, and the medicine that he was taking scared the Broncos off a little bit, maybe some other teams as well. I think that there's some of that stigma around Ohio State quarterbacks, if you will, not being able to translate well to the NFL. But this kid has a cannon for an arm. He's able to use his legs, not out of like, oh my God, my first read's not there, I have to run, but more so the zone read option is always kind of a threat with him. He can bootleg, he can throw across his body. You can move the pocket and buy him a little bit of extra time to read the field. He's played with a lot of very good wide receivers while at Ohio State, so he understands that caliber of talent and what kind of goes into building that relationship. So I wish the kid nothing but the best. I'm happy for him. I'm happy he's an orange and blue, even though it's not the right orange and blue.
Okay, here is my biggest fear with Justin Fields. And that is that while at Ohio State, he was under center less than 6% of the time. That number, that footwork, that technique is going to have to be fine-tuned in the NFL, because you have to play under center in the NFL. I mean, you don't have to, but it is sure a heck of a lot easier if you can play under center, because it forces the defense to have to respect a number.
Now,
yes, totally understand. Yeah, that's what sets up a lot of these quarterbacks for the struggle of getting into the NFL, is that the college game is a predominantly up-tempo, shotgun, spread them out, read option, which the NFL has adopted the read option because they've been forced to, because those are the types of players that they're getting from college now. And you want to play to your players' strengths, at least the smart ones do. But what really can confound defenses is when you aren't giving away all of the information pre-snap based on your alignment. And you can do everything from under center. There are a few things that you can't quite accomplish when you're in the shotgun. So that to me is a big concern. And that footwork is going to have to be, that technique, that footwork is going to have to be fine-tuned over the course of OTAs, over the course of training camp, over the course of the first couple weeks of the season, until that has become comfortable. Now, I don't think that they're going to have him under center 90% of the plays. That's not going to happen. It's not, this isn't going to be 1940s football where it's turn around and run the football every play, and the forward pass was illegal.
Just by comparison, how much was Fields under center? Do you have that in front of you?
How much was Fields under center?
Excuse me, Lawrence.
Oh, hold on. Let me look. I know that Trey Lance was under center 25% at the time. Let me see. Hold on. This is great radio/podcast.
While you're doing that, for me, Justin Fields definitely provides some intrigue, and it's one of those that when you're looking at a lot of dynasty startups right now, or dynasty rookie drafts, it's a very interesting mix as far as how those rooms are really looking at him, because he's either the second quarterback off the board, or there's been a lot of cases that he's falling down to the 6th, 7th, 8th pick on those guys. And of course, a lot of that has to do with some of the roster construction and things like that. I understand that, but it's very clear cut in most of these that Trevor Lawrence is number one. But then when you start looking at how teams are drafting these guys in rookie startups or rookie drafts for dynasty, Justin Fields or Trey Lance often is the number 2 quarterback taken off the board there. And Zach Wilson has been falling down there even more so. So he's a guy that provides a lot of intrigue again, and a guy that I think will take over probably, right after that bye week, regardless of when that bye week is. I think you'll see him come out there, and he's a guy that talent wise can definitely push the ball down the field, has the mobility, and can be a very good NFL quarterback. And when you put him on this Bears team, I think he's got a lot of pieces around him to allow him to succeed, right? The Bears tend to run the ball a fair bit, which allows them to establish the running game, which a good running game is a very good friend, especially to a young quarterback, because it allows them to be able to push the ball down the field without him seeing a ton, without necessarily, guys being able to sit back in the passing lanes and really, play a lot of that off-ball type of defense there. So I think you'll see some very good things for Justin Fields. It'll be one of those that I would be willing to take a shot on him as a second QB in a single QB league, and potentially a second quarterback in a super flex type of deal. So he's a guy that's got a ton of intrigue, and I'm really interested to see how he looks in camp and as this thing starts to progress throughout the season. Apparently I didn't buy enough time for Alex.
Well, the Justin Fields stat was like right there, front and center for me. I do not. Okay. According to this NBC Sports article, the shotgun percentage for Trevor Lawrence was 100%. He was always in shotgun. I don't. Yeah. Hey, it concerns me about Trevor Lawrence too. All right, like we weren't talking about Trevor Lawrence, but that concerns me too. He's going to have to figure out how to play under center.
Fair enough. Well, any desire to talk about the other quarterback they've got on the roster, Nick Foles?
No, everybody's going to get hurt, and he'll lead the Bears to the Super Bowl.
If Nick Foles is playing, there will be a second or third. I can't remember how many there actually have already been, but there will be another Chicago fire.
Oh, man.
And it won't be a cow that starts this one.
All right. All righty, guys. Well, let's go ahead and talk about some NFL news, unless you guys have any further thoughts on the Bears for 2021. All righty. So kind of a slow news week this week where the Colts signed Eric Fisher to a 1-year deal. The Jaguars signed Tim Tebow to a 1-year deal as a tight end. Kerryon Johnson was released by the Lions and claimed by the Eagles. The Lions went out and signed Darren Fells, and the Packers reportedly made an offer to Aaron Rodgers to make him the highest paid QB in the league, even outdoing Patrick Mahomes' deal. So, guys, what are your thoughts on the news?
Aaron Rodgers is not going to play for the Green Bay Packers. It's not about the money. He doesn't like the front office and their personnel decisions and the fact that he's been there for 16 years and they treat him like an old newspaper. Like he's just done with it. The writing is on the wall. The Packers have two choices. Really, they have two choices. Either let him retire and you get absolutely nothing in return, or you know what? You try and find out how much Denver or the Raiders or anybody else is willing to pay for him. And if you're dead set that he has to be in the AFC because you don't want to see him in the conference, in your conference, then those are basically your two options. You've narrowed it down: Denver and the Raiders. And quite frankly, I don't know that John Gruden's willing to pay enough to get Rodgers, but I think our boy Paxton is. Peyton,
yeah. This will obviously be the dominating NFL headline for the next 2 months, or certainly for the rest of this month.
Just one. Come June 2nd. And then
into June. Yeah, we'll see what happens come June 2nd. I think the Jaguars signing Tim Tebow as a tight end is a genius move by Urban Meyer. I know that we kind of talked about it, I think, during the draft special when it was kind of being floated out there. I think that was the first day that it was reported that Tebow was going to go work out for them as a tight end. I think it is a genius move by Urban Meyer because all of a sudden, the biggest thing in town is no longer your first overall rookie quarterback. The biggest thing in town, the guy that's going to command the most media attention, will be Tim Tebow, and that takes all of that off of Trevor Lawrence's plate. And maybe it doesn't take all of it, but it certainly takes a big chunk of it away from Trevor Lawrence. And if there's somebody who can handle the media, who was a member of the media, in fact, it's Tim Tebow. The guy has always had to deal with it, and he embraces it. You know, he will talk in front of a microphone and a camera, and that takes some of the attention away from Trevor Lawrence, at least from some of the extracurricular things that go on that are part of being an NFL player. Whether it is remain to be seen if locker rooms are going to look the same this year, if that's still going to be the Zoom call access, which the teams have a ton of control over who they make available in those Zoom calls. There are some rules that need to be followed, but certainly it will take some attention away from Trevor Lawrence. And that's great for that kid because it's already bad enough that, you know, you're going to this market, which isn't a huge media market anyways. But you're going to this market. You're going to be the number one overall pick. You'll have the national media on you. You'll have the local media on you. Well, now some of that gets taken away and put on Tim Tebow's plate. Plus, if Urban Meyer is really trying to build something, why not take one of your quintessential building blocks that you had from your past life as a college coach and try and insert that into the locker room in Jacksonville and build the culture that you want? We hear that word so much, the word culture. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hear that word so much, and that's what Urban Meyer is going to try and do. And Tim Tebow is a perfect building block for that. So I think the signing of Tim Tebow, whether or not he actually goes out and catches a pass, who cares? Because it's not that. I don't think that's what this move was. This move was more of a locker room. This move was more of a way of announcing for Urban Meyer to say, look, this is going to be my team. I'm going to get my guys in here. I already have my disciples that are going to follow what I have to say. And you can either get with the program or you can get the hell out of town. And that, I think, is what Urban Meyer is going to do, and that's what this signing screams to me. I don't see Tim Tebow as being a viable option in that offense, but there's so much more than just on-the-field stuff when it comes to building an NFL team. And Tebow is a perfect person for Urban Meyer to have in that locker room.
Right.
Couldn't agree more.
And you think about it too, before he was released for the last time, how many times it was, folks reportedly trying to talk him into moving to a different position, whether it was fullback, whether it was a running back type of position, whether it was tight end. And no, I'm a quarterback. Urban Meyer shows up and says, "Hey, Tim, I need a tight end. I'm ready, coach. Let's go." So it's one of those two that, probably the only guy that could have talked Tim Tebow into switching positions is the guy that he just signed for as well.
The thing that scares me about this is because they have that rapport, does he vulture red zone touchdowns away from Trevor Lawrence
and Travis Etienne?
Well, instituting the jump pass again, right?
Yep.
Okay,
very
we're
effective.
Gonna line him up.
Very effective.
He's on end. He's the tight end in motion. Oh, wait, hike the ball. Tebow comes across. He's right there, and all of a sudden he pops up, tosses it over the top, and there you go. DJ Chark, touchdown.
It could spell trouble in those goal line situations. But I think more than anything, it is Urban Meyer having an extension of himself in the locker room where he cannot be most of the time. He is a coach. It is a genius move, and I'm interested to see how it plays out.
It's a work ethic thing, right?
Right, but it could fracture a locker room thinking that you have, a spy in the room, and you got to mind your P's and Q's. But I think Urban Meyer is okay with that. The dude came from the college ranks where you have the ultimate control over your roster and its makeup, and you lose some of that control when you go to the NFL. Nick Saban couldn't do it, right? Nick Saban's amazing because he has the ultimate control over that team in Alabama that didn't translate to the NFL. So now he's got, a coach in the locker room, as Tim Tebow will probably be, and you've got somebody who can make guys mind their P's and Q's while they're in the team facility. And that's, I think, the dream that every coach wants, is that coach is always there, ever present, and making sure that you're doing things the way that he wants them done.
Right. Yeah, I think you're 100% correct there. Well, guys, any other thoughts on the news? All righty. Let's go ahead and we're going to move over to this rookie mock draft. So a couple of weeks before the draft went, we did a similar draft to this. It's going to be 2 rounds, and we're just going to snake through it. And the order is going to be where Alex starts, then Kevin, then me, all the way to a 12-team type of deal. And we're not necessarily picking it based on a current team construction. We're not picking it based on, these teams are going to be, all these players are going to end up on one team at the end of it. We're simply drafting for best position, best player available type of move there in a dynasty scenario. And we're going to kind of compare what it looked like before the draft and before landing spots were determined as to what the result looks like now after we know landing spots. So the way this is going to go is going to go Alex, then Kevin, then me, all the way to the 112. And then at the 201, it switches and it'll go me, Kevin, Alex in the second round. So Alex, you are on the clock, good sir.
Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. Put you on the clock, Kevin.
So are we doing single quarterback or super flex? I missed that.
Do it as a super flex.
Okay. Justin Fields.
And then I think at the 103, I'm going to actually take Najee. Alex, back to you.
The 104, I will take. I'm torn between Trey Lance and Kyle Pitts. I'll go Trey Lance since it's a super flex.
Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. I mean,
And that puts me at the 106, and I'm taking Jamar Chase. Back to you, Alex.
I'll go Jalen Waddle here.
Because it's the super flex, man.
Do it.
Zach
Do it.
Wilson.
Oh, I thought you were going to go elsewhere. Okay.
Once he said super flex, I was like, that's where he's going. So at the 109, let's see. That is a toughy one because of some of the picks still out there, but I'm going to go with another running back here and go with ETN. Alex at the 110.
Again, torn here between receiver or quarterback. Since it is super flex, I'll go quarterback and I'll go Mac Jones here.
Okay.
Javonte Williams.
All righty. And then I'm going to take a guy named Devonta Smith, Heisman winner with the last pick in the first round there. And when that's going to transition us into the second round. And with the 201, I am going to go with Trey Sermon. And that puts Kevin on the clock with the 202.
This is where I am officially torn. I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
All right. Did not see that one coming.
That's good. I'm a little hesitant with this pick, but Kadarius Toney.
Taking draft capital there, I see.
Yeah, I mean.
Fair enough. And right here with the 204, I kind of like Michael Carter in this situation, so that's where I'm going to go. Kevin at the 205.
Rashard Bateman is off the draft board in most drafts by now.
By now, yes.
Yeah.
I'm really, really hesitant on taking him because he plays for Baltimore. So with that, I'm going to change gears and actually go Elijah Moore.
Okay, I like it.
See, this is silly because obviously Bateman would probably be gone here. And I think if it were more than just the three of us who are not very high on Baltimore wideouts, he probably would go. I still think that I will look elsewhere too. And I'm going to go with Rondale Moore.
I like that one as well. Now it's one of those that I'm going to just take the draft capital, take the talent here, and I'm going to take Bateman, but this is normally the spot in all of my rookie drafts that I've been just gobbling up Terrence Marshall when it gets down to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But Bateman is going to be my pick here at the 207. Kevin at the 208.
That is where I will take Terrence Marshall and reunite him with Joe Brady.
Alex at the 209.
Oh boy. This one's tough. This one is tough. I'm way high on this guy. I shouldn't be, and he's not a second round pick. So I will stay away from that. Let's go with, I hate to go tight end here because it takes so long for them to develop. Tight end's not named Kyle Pitts, but I think it might be worth it to take the flyer here. I will go Pat Freiermuth.
All righty.
I'm not happy about that pick at all.
Definitely not where I would have gone there.
No.
But you leave some interesting room there for me. And there's some interesting names still out there. So looking at this one, it's probably going to be a little bit of a reach to go running back here, but I really, really am coming around on Kenneth Gainwell, who I think is going to be a PPR monster out there in Philadelphia. So that's where I'm going to go with Gainwell. And then Kevin, that puts you at the 211.
There's a couple of different things that I'd be looking at here. I think wide receiver is the play here. As much as I like Chuba Hubbard, if I'm a McCaffrey owner, I take a good hard look at this, knowing that I have the handcuff to the, number one overall running back. So, but that's the exception, not the rule, because most teams don't have Christian McCaffrey on them. So I'm going to pass on Chuba Hubbard. And then what I'm doing is Damien Brown out of Washington, or Amari Rodgers, or guys that I'm looking at towards the end of the second round. I think for the sake of doing this, I'm going to go with Damien Brown in the Washington football team camp.
Very cool. Alex, that puts you with the last pick here at the 212.
Okay. Since this is only a 2-round thing, I still don't think that either one of these two are viable second-round options. But I do think that people need to pay attention to them, and it's certainly not for this year. It would be this is Dynasty, right? Right?
Yes.
You said this was like Dynasty startup. I do think in the next 2 years, both of these guys are starting for their respective draft teams. And I think that the better situation is Kellen Mond over Kyle Trask. So I'll go Kellen Mond here.
Okay. That's not that big of a reach, though. You look at a lot of those times. He's been an early third in most cases. So
right.
Yeah, maybe.
He's a super flex.
Right. If it's considered a reach, you're reaching by 2-3 picks type of thing there. So you're kind of comparing that back and forth between what we did before we knew landing spots and after landing spots. You definitely have some risers and some fallers there with both quarterbacks moving up into the top 2 picks. Najee was the 101 last time. Now he's the 103. Trey Lance took a pretty big swing up this past time around. Mac Jones took a big swing up, who was a second rounder when we did that the first time around. Bond wasn't a guy that we even drafted. Trey Sermon was a guy that moved up. Marshall was a guy that moved down. So there was a lot of movement going on with that. So, kind of interesting to think. What were your guys' takeaways from doing that exercise?
I think that in this draft, outside of the top three quarterbacks being Lawrence, Fields, and Lance, I think outside of that, there's only 3 position players that are locks, that are absolute locks. Najee Harris, Kyle Pitts, and Jamar Chase. I have hated drafting at the end of these rounds because I don't overly love Jalen Waddle with Tua. I don't overly love Devonta Smith in Philadelphia. The running back depth is trash after Javonte Williams. So you have your top 3 running backs, and then that's kind of, I say trash and it sounds so bad. Trey Sermon is a guy who's going to be a project. He's not going to walk in and be the starter. He's going to have to kind of get adapted to the Kyle Shanahan system, see if he can be more of a workhorse type back. He's very explosive. So that's good. He's a good best ball play. but I do worry about Trey Sermon a little bit. Michael Carter is a guy who's never going to be a workhorse back. He is always going to be kind of that 40 to 45% guy in the backfield. So he's always the 1B option. Sitting out there, Chuba Hubbard was great until he went to Carolina. So there's a lot of these landing spots that just don't do it for me. And I've found that I really don't like this draft class very much as I thought I did. Now that we're seeing landing spots where they are, what you think their usage is going to be, I don't like this draft class very much. I haven't been very fond of my rookie drafts to this point, and I've had a couple really good ones, but I don't love them.
I think that's the biggest thing is these, and I said it obviously when we did this the last time when we did this exercise, so much depends on where these guys land because you get an idea of the situation that they're walking into and what their usage might be, that it definitely changes how you view them. I mean, outside of the can't miss guys, right? Outside of Lawrence and Pitts and would you say Fields was the other can't miss guy? Who's your other can't miss?
I think you're top
outside of the quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah.
Najee, Pitts,
outside
and
the quarterback.
Chase.
Yeah. Outside of those guys, it really was dependent upon situation. And so, that's where, to me, a Kellen Mond kind of moves up the draft board a little bit. That's a guy that I don't think any of us were at all intrigued by until we found out where he was going. It turns out he's going to go to a situation in Minnesota that he might be the starting quarterback, not this upcoming year, but the year after. It very well could be. Kyle Trask, same way. We know that Tom Brady has limited time. I mean, he wants to keep playing forever, but Father Time is undefeated, right? And we know
Brady
that
might be an outlier.
It very well could be, very well. But that's an okay situation there. Well, Mac Jones is going to a team that his skill set can be utilized by the coaching staff there. So it really, really depended upon where these guys landed and how you view them. And that's why, it's so difficult to do these rookie drafts before you know where they're going. And I'm glad that we revisited it because opinions changed after we got more information.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those that, kind of the idea for that spark from the standpoint when you looked at last year in a lot of rookie drafts, CEH went to the 101 because of a situation that he went to. And it was a guy that most folks didn't have as a top 5 or 6 back in that draft class. He was kind of that 6th or 7th guy in most of the cases. And because of the landing spot, jumps all the way to the 101. Now, a lot of those guys that were drafted him at the 101, I think at this point, if they could redo it, would have wished that they had gone with a, Jonathan Taylor or Cam Akers or some of these other guys that were, touted as a better talent there. And instead they drafted for the position. So one of those that is very interesting to keep be mindful of and be very aware of how much that landing spot is going to change your perception of these guys, because the landing spot would ultimately base your opportunity, and opportunity is going to be a key component of fantasy value there. But be very mindful of that and temper expectations based on talent and landing spot combined. So any other thoughts on this exercise? Okay, let's go ahead and hit up some Dynasty trade targets. And what we're looking here is who are you looking to try and acquire going into the 2021 season for Dynasty purposes for a running back situation? Who's a buy low candidate for you at the running back?
I think in a lot of circles, David Montgomery is a guy who a lot of people aren't liking because Cohen's coming back, because they brought in Williams. So David Montgomery has the opportunity to be a buy low candidate and a guy that you can get that is far less than his running back 4 finishing spot of last year. So he's a guy that I'm looking at and very interested in. Let's see. A guy that I want, I don't know that he's not a buy low guy, but a guy that I want is Cam Akers. Like, I want a little bit more Cam Akers around me. I wasn't in great positions to draft him last year. And I'm trying to find ways to pick him up in different situations this year. But I think my biggest buy low is Montgomery.
Yeah, I was going to say Montgomery too. I know we just hounded on him for the better part of an episode there. But I would say his asking price probably isn't too high. I think another guy whose asking price isn't too high and it might be worth the risk, at least early on, is James Robinson there in Jacksonville. And I think, obviously anybody who got him, if they get anything out of it, they got more than they thought they would when they picked him up off of waivers, because there's no way you drafted him. So if they can flip him for anything, I think that's a good spot. With ETN coming to town, with a new coaching staff coming to town, I think that James Robinson's value has declined a little bit, especially from what it would have been at the end of the season or prior to the draft. So he's a guy that you could probably target for very little. And I still think there's tread on those tires. I still think he has a spot in that offense. If for nothing else, it seems like a pretty safe play that you don't have to give up too much, and you have a chance at what could be an upper end, a bottom end RB1 if, for whatever reason, ETN doesn't play at all. But definitely an RB2, RB3 guy.
Yeah. A guy for me that's worth taking a look at is Mike Davis, who, we all thought that Atlanta would probably add another running back through the draft, and they didn't. So it really looks like he's going to be kind of that sole guy down there in Atlanta. So, definitely a spot worth looking at. And, if you're a contender type of team, might be worth looking at getting a flyer on, seeing what you can do with that way. But as far as another guy that's kind of probably the best value that you can get for him throughout his career right now would be a guy like Zeke, and we've talked about that one in the past, so I'm not going to belabor that point. But any other thoughts on some buy low candidates?
I think those are kind of the big two here at the moment. We'll see how things shake out through training camp, injuries.
Yeah, there will be some more. Yeah.
But at the moment, those are the two that really stick out as guys that go ahead and see what people are asking for. There's nothing wrong with asking the questions.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think that's going to take us down to the end of it. Any final thoughts for the listeners?
Good luck in your fantasy drafts. This is a fun time. And try some different things. If you're in a bunch of different leagues, try some different strategies. This is the time that you can really see what works, see what doesn't work. I mean, obviously these time will tell on some of them, but try some different things here.
Cool. Well, guys, I do believe that that's going to take us to the end of it, and that's going to wrap up yet another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Make sure that you're subscribing to all
Thank
of
you.
the...
Come on.
I was getting there. I had to keep you on your toes right there. Hey, I'll even put the banner up down here for the live viewers there. Make sure you're hitting us up on our socials. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, at Good Old Boys FF. You can find us on the YouTube channel, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. Make sure you're clicking the follow and subscribe buttons with all those places. Leave us reviews. We appreciate it. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.
Did he duck out and not end the show?
That's awesome.